I hope that by the end of this series, you'll know much more about this, your brain, and how it works, and also that you'll be able to use it far more effectively. During the series, I'm going to be talking about expanded use of your memory and its almost infinite capacity, about how to use your vision far more effectively, both in general terms and for more functional uses like reading. I'm also going to be discussing the organization of time, learning and study, and things like life in general. Recent discoveries in the fields of psychology, biology, and education have shown that the brain is an infinitely more complex and organized organism than we had ever realized before. Imagine yourself making a telephone call. You can now dial virtually anyone in the world. Anyone can dial you, everyone can dial everyone. The number of interconnections is so vast as to be almost unimaginable. That is even minute compared with the interconnections your brain can make. But let's put some real perspective on unimaginable numbers. Here you are, pretty substantial in your own eyes, about to go on a trip through the universe. Let's relate the distance we're traveling and the number of atoms, the smallest building units in our universe, to the number of cells and possible interconnections of your brain. You are already less than an insignificant speck. The Earth is disappearing fast, and we're on our way to the planets. We're now leaving the sun, 100 million miles from home, one with 8 noughts after it, but we have more brain cells than this. About now, we've traveled 10,000 million miles, one with 10 noughts after it. That's how many individual units there are in the human brain. Let's continue our journey and try to think about the number of atoms that build this vast structure, our universe. By the end of this journey, we will have traveled in miles, one with 20 noughts after it. That's 100 million, million miles. The number of atoms is one with 100 noughts after it. You can calculate that number in millions if you like. The brain, remember, has 10,000 million cells. The number of interconnections these cells can make is infinitely greater than the number of atoms in the universe. Not one with 100 noughts, but one with 800 noughts after it. Just try writing that out and you will see how phenomenally vast it is. So you see, we all have inside our heads an organism with the most enormous potential. But looking around, you might say, where's the evidence of all that potential? In answer to that question, I ask a question myself, and that is, have we ever really investigated it? Have we even devised the most simple operating manual? Think of your formal education. Ask yourselves the following questions. In school, were you taught how your eyes can scan print, getting all kinds of different information from it? Were you told about the different speed your eyes can travel? Were you taught about the nature of your memory, why it forgets things, how it records things, how it can record things better? Were you taught special study techniques which would enable you to relate, not just to your own subject, but to any subject with confidence? Were you taught the nature of problem solving? Were you taught to think creatively? Were you taught to think? The answer to all these questions is usually no. So it's not surprising that we have difficulty in concentration, that we have difficulty in motivating ourselves to learn, that we have difficulty in studying, that we have difficulty with selection and rejection, that we have difficulty with simple getting down to things, that we find it almost impossible to organize, that, in other words, we find it difficult to use our heads. Who then is to blame for all this? The parents and teachers, the schools, the education authorities, the media, the child? The answer, I think, is that no one is to blame. Very seldom does a parent or a teacher set out to actively stifle or bore a child to death. Most efforts at education are sincere, an attempt to bring the child out to help him develop. The problem lies in the fact that we have really very little information up to now as to how to relate to our own minds. Very little information. Speculation, yes. Take the Greeks. They were in the dark as far as the mind was concerned. They thought that it was either some form of strange spirit, or that it functioned as a result of different pressures in the body from liquid or air currents. In fact, they didn't know where it was situated. Aristotle, who was the first of the scientific experimenters, said that most of the functions we now attribute to the brain were located in the heart. After the Greeks, nothing much happened until the 16th century, when philosophers racked their brains trying to find out where they were. About 200 years ago, the brain was finally centered in the head and realized to be responsible for thinking, memory, and learning. We now know that it also has connections that go down the neck into the body, that it has very refined biochemical networks, that it generates a mass of electrical impulses. Nearly every area of knowledge is finding itself involved with brain research. And yet, even now, we are still very ignorant about it. The more we investigate it, the more we find out that we don't know. The more we try to pin it down, the more it evades our grasp. The more we actually learn about it, the more we realize what an extraordinary complex organism it is. I've already mentioned that the number of brain cells is almost infinite, especially the number of interconnections they can make. But there are a number of other simple but fascinating facts. Your brain, this, weighs only about 3 pounds, approximately 2% of your whole body weight. And yet it uses 20% of all the energy that your body takes in, especially oxygen. Also, some rather amusing facts. You see with your eyes at the front of your body. The seeing center of your brain, the occipital lobe, is located at the back. There are other interesting things about this as well, especially in relation to memory. It seems that the memory of a mind, memory of a brain mind, is perhaps almost infinite. There are some simple evidences for this, and you can think about your own experiences, which scientists now believe are beginning to confirm this. It seems that when we take in an experience, it's registered forever. Now, if you think about walking into a room and suddenly experiencing a smell that you haven't smelled for years, that smell will trigger off all kinds of memories, all kinds of associations in your mind, and you will get a complete, immediate, direct recall of what happened. Now, the happening was by chance, and yet your recall was perfect. So it suggests that that chance recall is located in secret pockets, and there are many more secret pockets than we now realize. These secret pockets are also brought out in things like dreams. We all have to dream, in fact, in order to survive, although some of us don't actually recall them the next morning, but we all do dream. And those of you who remember them will recall that very often you will dream about an event or a person that you hadn't thought of for years and years and years, and suddenly up they pop in a dream. This is again evidence that your brain is storing it all and using it for some later instance. So there's an enormous amount that we don't know. Taking what we do know about this organism, which is now an increasing amount of knowledge, we can begin to change the way in which we think about our learning abilities. We can begin to re-look at the way we learn to learn, and can begin to look again at the way that we develop creatively.